Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment. Our guest for today is Randy Long. He's the CEO of Long Business Advisors, as well as an author and speaker. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we were talking a few minutes ago. It sounds like you have a new book coming out, The Braveheart Exit, which is coming out on May 17th. Tell us what your book is all about.
Well, the book is written in order to kind of help the business owners prepare for a successful exit from their business, to strengthen their families along the way, and to live a legacy, if you will, instead of just trying to leave one. So the intent of it is to deal with this huge tsunami of business owners that are going to exit their business in the next 5 to 10 years. There's like 50% in the next 7 years, the next 5 years, and about 70% within the next 10 years. So that whole baby boomer thing is happening to the business owners, and there's a huge number coming out.
Wow, interesting. And for the record, you are a certified financial advisor and a certified exit planner. What is a certified exit planner?
Yeah. A certified exit planner is really a credential that is added on top of what I would call foundational credentials, like a lawyer, a certified financial planner, or a CPA. So it's designed specifically to train professionals to help business owners prepare to exit their businesses. So that's the whole function of it.
Okay. So if somebody is trying to put a price tag on their business, what is the first question that you typically ask them in order to move towards figuring out a value?
Well, first of all, we like to drag them back into the process and make them, consider what their own personal assets are, what those are worth, and then we look at what the business is worth. We can get an appraisal by, usually we use an M&A firm to help us get a market appraisal for that. And then we have to talk to them about, what is it that you need from the sale of the business or the transition out of the business in order to meet your financial security needs here. And then that helps us figure out whether there's a gap in there that we need to work on trying to fill.
Okay, speaking of gaps, in my business, I'm in real estate, and I've done acquisitions of other real estate organizations over the years. And in my experience, it seems like it's such a long process because the first time you reach out to an owner about potentially selling their business, they believe the price tag is so much higher than the actual value of their business, and it literally takes years for them to realize that their pricing was off. So what percentage of owners in any business are ever happy or agree with the number that the appraiser comes up with?
Well, I would say that there's typically, like you said, there's more people that think their business is worth more than it really is, but there are also a substantial number of people that actually underestimate the value of their business. We had a company a few years back that that came to us to ask to help them with a transition. They thought the business was worth 20 to 25 million. We sold it for just under 100. So they really didn't understand what made the business valuable, and that is the same problem for business owners who think their business is worth a lot more. But it has to come back to the idea of looking at a business through the eyes of a purchaser and how they see the value of your business. And too often, the business owners really don't know what makes their companies worth more.
Interesting. So have any of your clients or prospective clients become happy about their appraisal and just gone out and tried to sell it on their own, or are you always involved in the process?
No. Sometimes I've had people try to sell it on their own. We had I have a friend of mine that had a business out in the West Coast who got an unsolicited offer from a big bank to sell his company. And the offer was pretty substantial, and he was so excited about it. So he signed a little agreement to let him come in and look through the business and determine, to learn about it, to determine if they wanted to buy it and such. But after a while, things seemed to be going nowhere. So he went and talked to an M&A advisor friend of his, and the guy told him, listen, nope, they're never going to close this transaction. And the reason that I know they're not is because they're not working on the definitive agreement itself. All they're doing is on a fishing expedition to learn about what you're doing and how you're doing it so they can steal information from you.
Wow.
So you have to be really careful about that kind of thing. So there's it's a dangerous world out there. And then sometimes people think that they just don't need professionals. I think they can save the money, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And saving the money turns out to be typically a really expensive mistake, because this is for most business owners, it's a one-time occasion. You get one shot to sell your business, and you need to do it well.
Absolutely. So are there occasions where you go in and value a business, and then instead of an owner deciding to sell their business right now, that you can give them tips in order to increase the value so that if they decide to sell at a later date, they'll get more money for it?
Yes, definitely. As a matter of fact, in the process of what our exit planning work, which we call the Braveheart planning process, there's a part in here where we're focusing on what we call value catalysts. That is, we put on our lenses of a buyer, and we go in and we look at that business, and we determine, we're looking for things like a management team that is capable of taking the business to the next level. And really that's probably one of the most important things, because a lot of times business owners are businesses are being bought because they want, they're not necessarily wanting to run a company, they just want a business because it's valuable to them. So if you've got a management team that's in place and can stay in place and the business owner is not needed, the business typically brings a higher valuation. There are other things also, like diversified customer bases, so you're not limited to just a couple of customers, because the risk rises when you've only got a couple of customers that you're doing business with if one of them were to leave you. There are all recurring and sustainable revenue streams. Business owners like to look at businesses that are steady, but they have a growing revenue stream, and they're more predictable. They can build upon the past every year, and so those kind of things are desirable for purchasers. Also, things that are like, they don't like to rely on one or two key employees or one or two key salespeople. They want diversification in the number of people that are providing the income or the intellectual capital, if you will. And then they also like to see realistic plans to grow revenue going forward, and even if possible, scalability. So that's a few of the things that a business owner would look at if he was wanting to acquire another business.
Interesting. And do you think that a business could potentially have a different value depending on who's looking to buy it? Like, it might be worth more depending, if I really need that business because it complements my business, then I might be willing to pay more than someone else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If we analogize this to, I'll call it agriculture. You're in the real estate business. If I've got a piece of farmland I've got 200 acres abutting each other, and my neighbors is willing to sell his 200, I'm going to pay more for that extra 200 than I'm going to pay for a 200 across town.
Right. Because
I get synergy. I can use the same tractors, all of that sort of thing. So the same kind of thing works within other businesses too, where sometimes there's a hole in there and what they're trying to sell, or they can take technology from another company and apply it to their own company. I mean, there's a lot of synergies that can be made, and those kind of buyers are willing to pay more than just a financial buyer. The financial buyer is just looking at the business on its own as a standalone, with no synergies between any other businesses. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Which is, by the way, one of the reasons why too that having help in this whole planning and selling process is having people help you strategize on what some of those potential buyers are and seeking them out for you.
Right. That happened between Coldwell Banker and Zip Realty in our market maybe a year and a half ago. But Zip Realty had this amazing back-end technology platform. They weren't that big as an organization, but they got some extremely absurd asking price for the business because Coldwell Banker wanted the back-end technology. They didn't really care as much about the profitability or the agent base, but they wanted the technology piece to it.
And
I've even seen companies buy other companies just to get technology and actually shut the rest of the business down because they didn't care anything about it.
Now, Randy, what about when the business doesn't really have any of those kind of assets? What if it's truly a a sales organization with no hard assets, no real estate holdings, how do you value something like that?
Yeah, it's harder. But again, if there are processes, sometimes sales teams are actually driven by the reason they're so successful isn't because they're stars on the team. Sometimes sales organizations are really successful because there's an awesome training program in place, and there's wonderful processes, and there's software. It's just a whole kind of machine that they bring people into, and so sometimes the sales companies are really good because of those things. So sometimes you can get values based on the processes and the fact that you've got a proven track record of bringing people through it and above average sales and things like that. So it isn't always just a star system in the sales world.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I agree that each of those variables, if you will, have to be considered through the eyes of an outside buyer.
And what about the way the purchase price is paid if you do come to an agreement? It's not typical in a company like that where there aren't any hard assets. You wouldn't expect to be paid all of your purchase price like day one, then you walk away with the money, that type of thing, correct?
You would not. You would typically have what's called an earn-out period, or they would hold back some money, or they would set some criteria that you need to reach certain sales goals in the next 6 months or year or whatever it is in order to receive the rest of the money. And that is all negotiation and part of the whole M&A process itself, and making sure you have a good deal lawyer and you know what you're doing, and to be protected as much as possible. I mean, in my world, I like to get as much cash as I can up front, because that's the only cash you really promise that you'll get, because sometimes things are outside of your control, but you're retaining risk whenever there's a holdback or an earn-out. So, yeah, all those things have to be taken into consideration in the structure of a particular deal that you do.
Do you have any examples of stories, either good or bad, of people that you've worked with or businesses that you've assisted?
Yeah, sure I have. I had one recently, which we closed, I think, maybe October-ish or so. I was on vacation the summer before out in Manhattan Beach in California, and a guy that I'd been working with for a couple years on giving advice on growing the business in such a way that it could be sold. He called me while I was on vacation and said, "Hey, I got an offer for the business," and he told me what the offer was, and I said, "You're not going to take that, right?" He said, "No, I'm not going to take it. I'm just calling you to let you know." I said, "Good, because I feel like we're going to get at least double that on the sale." And so fully, basically 9.5 or so months later, we finished the sale of the business, and we did get slightly more than double the offer. It was for a medical software company and a SaaS company, if you will. And interesting on this one, though, are you familiar with the term cram down?
Yes.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, in this particular case, the company, which was a financial buyer, at the very last moment before the close, decided that there was something that they just didn't like about the company that they said wasn't disclosed. But of course, all of it had been disclosed. It was just, an attempt to force the company, the price down, if you will.
Yep.
And my particular owner here, he was tired of the transaction and wanted to be out, and so he allowed the price to be reduced on the last day. I told him to tell him to shove it, but he wasn't willing to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. How often do emotions play a role, especially you have a business where somebody's built it from scratch? It seems like you're emotionally tied to it. It's like a real estate transaction, basically.
Yeah, it's really hard for a lot of buyers. It's almost like a child,
Yes.
Especially if they started it from scratch and have grown it to the point where it's ready to. They have to transition, and no child wants it, and there's no business, no employee that's interested or capable, and so they have to take it out and sell it on the market. And it's really painful for them, honestly, for most of them anyway. And so the emotion of going through the whole transaction is a big part of what needs to be managed, because the buyers will want to take advantage of that if they see it, truthfully.
So do you ever have situations where an owner of a business has a family member that is wanting to come in and buy it, and that you look at it and say, that family member is not cut out to run the business, you're better off selling it to a third party?
Yeah, it depends on how they want to sell it. So in structuring the sale or the transition, we try to make sure that control can't transfer until we have all the money we're supposed to have. So in that example, if I had a kid that if I had the owner who thought that he had one of his kids that was going to take over, but, whether I think they should or shouldn't, I would give him my advice on it, but assume that he does, and we can set forth certain criteria that he needs to reach in the next couple of years for us to continue in the transaction. And if he doesn't reach those particular criteria, then the deal's over anyway. And I can kind of get rid of some of them that way. Most parents, though, have a really good sense of the fact that their kids aren't qualified.
Right.
The bigger question is not so much that one. To me, it's more of whether or not the parent or the employee that is capable actually wants it. So I had a case not too long ago where the owner was certain that he was going to transition or sell the business to his key employee. And so we started down the road, and we're a couple of months into it, and finally I said, I need to talk to your guy. I want to interview your guy here and see where he is on everything, and he kept putting me off on it. But I finally got the interview with him, and sure enough, he says, no, in 3 years, I'm retiring and leaving. I want to go do something else. I have no intent whatsoever to take this business.
That's interesting.
Yeah. They presume things, but they don't ask. Parents and owners do the same thing.
Well, thank you so much. If anybody has an interest in creating an exit strategy for your business, first of all, you can check out the book that's coming out, The Braveheart Exit, coming out on May 17th. You can pre-order that at Randy M, as in Michael, Long, randymlong.com. And you can learn more about Randy at longbusinessadvisors.com.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Randy. That's going to do it for this edition of Get Real with Bob and Stacy. Tune in again next weekend for more.